Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Center the Lakers might have pursued. JaVale McGee is off the board. We'll explain next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always going to be free, never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go and hang out with over 20,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom, Andy, are wondering who the Lakers are going to sign to fill this backup center spot or backup to the backup, if everything goes well with Jaxson Hayes, I suppose. One name that was out there and not for very long, JaVale McGee. Released by the Dallas Mavericks. There was some speculation as to whether or not the Lakers would be interested, and the answer was apparently no, or at the very least they weren't interested fast enough because JaVale McGee, according to Chris Haynes, is heading to Sacramento.
Yeah, and he actually really fits a need for Sacramento. Like, they don't really have a lot of size on the team. They don't have a lot of shot blocking. And Domantas Sabonis, who is one of their best players, and he's an all NBA caliber team. He still doesn't do some of the things at center that you would look for from that traditionally at that position, and certainly not when it comes to rim protection, things like that. Maybe he ends up a better fit with the Kings than he was with Dallas. They certainly play more at a tempo that could suit JaVale more. We actually got a comment on the YouTube section from Markeith Moore that he thought that JaVale would actually do better with the Lakers than Dallas, simply because Dallas was one of the slowest teams in the league. And I will admit, I had not considered that when you and I were talking about why we were not wild at the prospect of bringing in JaVale. I'm still not crazy about it or feeling like the Lakers lost out on some big opportunity, to be clear, but just that part of it was not something I actually had considered. Just the idea that JaVale was a truly bad fit with Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously it's a moot point now that because he's not coming here, but this gets to the sort of the challenge the Lakers have. It's like, JaVale isn't a perfect fit in most places where you might need him to fill like a significant role. There's a good chance that even if he was misused in Dallas and the circumstances weren't ideal and all that other stuff, that, he's 34, 35, a guy whose game was based and has been based on kind of a freakish athleticism, as much as an evolved, to go along with, a good understanding of the game and, great attitude, great teammate and all that kind of stuff. But his effectiveness on the court is based a lot in athleticism. If that starts to go, it's not like he's left with, this rich bag of tricks offensively for him to engage with. So,
or frankly, defensively. He's not
both.
somebody, he's not somebody that you want switching out, ISO, at the top of the arc, something like that. JaVale he can be effective as a lane deterrent, or certainly as a shot blocker. And again, Sacramento really needs that. They were one of the worst shot blocking teams in the league last year. But versatility is not the name of JaVale's game defensively. He's also, for those asking who are you going to bring in to deal with Nikola Jokic, and I think the answer proved last year was there's nobody in the league. But that's also not what JaVale really does either. And we saw that 3 years ago in the series against Denver in the Western Conference Finals in the bubble. JaVale started playing less because ultimately that became Dwight Howard's role. JaVale is a big, imposing presence, but he's never been terribly physical.
No,
that way. There's a difference.
No. And like I said, it answers the question of whether or not the Lakers would be interested in kicking the tires on JaVale, and the answer was no, because, or at the very least, they were going to make him wait because he he signed really quickly or came to an agreement to go to Sacramento really quickly. It's smart for JaVale. Like, don't wait around. Don't try to, he's had a great career. You don't want to end up somewhere, some sort of, crappy team with nothing to play for, where they're probably going to trade you or this or that or whatever halfway through the year. Sacramento is a great spot for a veteran player like that looking to play meaningful basketball, over the last year or two of his career. So good for him. But at the very least, it says for sure that the Lakers regarded McGee as lesser than the other guys that might be out there because they thought he was better, unless JaVale just chose to go to Sacramento over the Lakers. The Lakers wouldn't make him that kind of, they didn't move fast enough. They, somebody else was clearly a higher priority, which is fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know who the priorities are. At this point, it's been pretty well reported. It's either Christian Wood or Bismack Biyombo. I think those are the two guys that the Lakers are earmarking. And frankly, those are both, even as somebody who is not wild at the idea of bringing in Christian Wood, I would rather bring in Biyombo. I would bring in either one of them before I bring in JaVale. And, I love JaVale when we covered him. I think he's been a great story. He's been a great sort of career redemption and like reputation redemption over the course of his career. But yeah, I would bring in Wood or Biyombo easily before JaVale.
Yeah, it was funny. Like, one of the best headlines I saw of this thing with JaVale going to Sacramento was 3-time champion JaVale McGee to sign with the Kings. And I was like, that's cool. For a guy who went from like a meme maybe before they were, but like, the Shaq and the Fool kind of thing to be seen, put in a headline as 3-time NBA champion, he's had one of the coolest career changes. And, we talked about Kwame Brown.
By the way, he also won an Olympic gold.
That's true. We talked about Kwame Brown as being somebody that, the gap between the person we met versus the person we were expecting was as wide as any player that I've ever encountered in not just basketball, just any sport that I've ever covered. I can't say the same is true for JaVale because I knew more about, the reporting, and there was more written about him and his influence in Golden State and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised by that. But in terms of if you want to kind of just think of a person who changed the narrative, changed the way that people talk about him in an incredibly positive way, it's hard to come up with guys more than JaVale, and guys who deserve it more, because I loved having a chance to cover him. He's a super great dude.
Yeah. Really, really funny, really smart. Again, good for him. I don't think he's going to have a big role in Sacramento, but I think he has an opportunity for a role. And if nothing else, like I said, there's nobody on this team that really does what he does. And, they were lacking rim protection last season. So,
right. And they lost, not that he was a huge rim protector, but they lost like Rashawn Holmes.
Yeah.
And, like, they've had some turnover there. It does point to, like, the Lakers have a unique challenge here when it comes to filling that spot, because it's somebody that they both need to be able to play big minutes where needed, but also need to be able to handle not being played big minutes because they might not. And so, finding that guy, that's why I think, Biyombo is somebody who makes sense, because exactly what you're getting. You can certainly handle, 22 minutes, 23 minutes a game. Christian Wood obviously is used to playing those kinds of minutes. So we'll see where the Lakers go. This does not seem like anything that's going to resolve itself particularly quickly. And
it may not resolve itself until James Harden and or Damian Lillard are traded.
Right.
Or until the Lakers say we can't wait any longer, but we're not.
Or until Wood or Biyombo say, like, this is the thing. Like, JaVale is taking the opportunity to go somewhere quickly. Now, JaVale has the advantage of not needing to get paid because the Mavericks are taking care of that for him. So there's less of a financial thing going on there, whereas Wood is trying to squeeze more out of that rock or whatever it might be. Anyway, so you're right. This could take a while to resolve itself. Interesting GM ranking came out with Yahoo. It's September, late August.
Interesting is
September.
one way to put it. Yes.
I respect the effort here. And we'll get into where does Rob Pelinka rank? We'll get into it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, and it's time to get ready for the NFL season. It is coming really, really soon. You got incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5, just $5, and you get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. You can use those bonus bets on spreads, on player props, over-unders, futures, so much more. And all customers, all of them, who bet $5 will get $100 off on NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. App is really easy to use. You're going to love the experience. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
All right. So over at Yahoo, Ben Rohrbach has took a stab at GM rankings. It's rankings time of year. That's where we are in the NBA calendar.
Rankings season with a Z.
Right. Yeah. And he did it in a way that I respect the effort to try something different. He kind of tried to combine basketball with baseball, sort of a sabermetric thing. He did things in terms of kind of came up with a metric to the equivalent of on base percentage and slugging percentage and OPS, and trying to make it more fun and something interesting for the offseason. I am not here, doesn't totally work. I am not here to pick on Ben Rohrbach for, doing the same thing that all of us are doing, which is trying to make stuff interesting at a tough time of year. But there's some interesting stuff in it, to me, at least, Andy, about where the GMs in this ranking land. And particularly when you start to think about the criteria and the way we look at guys and what they have to work with and all that kind of stuff. He has Rob Pelinka, based on this formula that he's using, as the 15th best GM in basketball. So, I mean, quite literally right in the middle there. And it's based on a few different things. There's draft picks and how those have landed, and trades and success with free agents. And when you look at the Lakers, what stuck out to me was when you look at the Lakers, both how few draft picks Rob Pelinka has had really to work with.
That I guess you would call purely his own, because when he first came in, Lonzo, Kyle Kuzma,
right,
Josh Hart, those are technically, I guess, considered the Magics.
Yeah. So I think he's Ben was only using Pelinka from 2019. So correct. It was post Magic.
Right.
So the only draft picks here are THT and Max Christie. And obviously this year's guys who aren't part of that. You look at the trades, and it's Anthony Davis, and it's Rui Hachimura, and it's the deadline deal with Beasley, Vanderbilt, and D'Angelo. And then, the Russell Westbrook deal, and the Patrick Beverley deal, and the Dennis Schroeder deal. And it's just to me, this list, and it's a little bit incomplete, and I disagree with some of the categorizations of it, but it really reminded me of how specific, in a lot of ways, being GM of the Lakers has sort of traditionally been. Big swings at free agents, giant trades for superstars, not a lot of draft picks to work with, and all that kind of stuff. And we've talked a lot about, maybe the Lakers are kind of turning a corner because they've had what most people would consider to be a normal team's offseason. I'm wondering if they did this ranking in 5 years in the same kind of way, if the stuff might shift a little bit, like the Lakers profile might look a little different. That's what stuck out to me, at least.
Okay, well, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what they're going to look like in 5 years. I mean, it's difficult to have that conversation. I mean, Rob Pelinka right now, I think, is in pretty good standing among Laker fans, but I don't think that standing is in pen. I think it's in pencil. I think it can be fluid, just like everything with as demanding a fan base as the Laker fan base is. You are always one misstep away from people calling for your head. As far as the evaluation of this, because that's ultimately how Pelinka landed in the middle, I preface this by saying, I know Ben Rohrbach's work. I respect it. He's good. I think his methodology here, like you said, using a formula where you're looking at different trades or free agency transaction draft picks is like a home run, a single, a double, a triple.
Right. He's trying to make it like baseball.
Right. I frankly thought that he evaluated a lot of these very strange. And it brought out, I guess, the Laker fan in me in ways that all of a sudden started getting me to put on my cape for Rob Pelinka, which, I guess this is where you really know you're a fan, because all of a sudden it brings that out of me. But
no, I'm not even necessarily caping for the guy, but I agree with you. There were some notable,
but also too,
he got the evaluation wrong.
And the reason this stands out to me isn't necessarily to argue with Ben as much as it is to speak to how all of our evaluations of execs around the league, or good trade, good pick, bad pick, whatever. Like, I guess a lot of it has to do with like the prism through you're looking at or how you're evaluating.
Give me an example, because I'm wondering if
I will
some
give
of
you
your
many
examples.
I will
I'm
give
wondering
you,
if they match up with mine.
I will give you many, because I have a long list. There was a lot here that frankly I thought was just bizarre. For example, Dennis Schroeder in 2022, his recent stint, was labeled a single. I don't know how a guy who went from veteran minimum guy struggling to get paid to playing well enough to get 11 mil per season, on top of the way Schroeder played this year and his help getting a team to the Western Conference Finals, I don't know how that's a single. That makes no sense to me.
At
Danny
the veterans
Green,
minimum, that was a fantastic signing. That worked out really well.
Right. Danny Green, the free agency signing of him was given just a single. Like, he was a starter on a championship team. Like, unless you're dinging Rob Pelinka, as I've said before, like the idea that he got lucky that Danny Green was specifically waiting for Kawhi to make a decision, and that's the only reason he was available while the Lakers were waiting. Like, you get a starter for a championship team, that has to be at least a double. It just has to be. I don't know how Alex Caruso, who was an undrafted free agent, went from undrafted free agent to high-end rotation player on a championship team. He's called a double. That's a triple or a home run.
A home run.
When you consider the context.
That is a home run.
Like, and Austin Reeves, also considered a double. He's an undrafted free agent who in 2 seasons appears to be at worst a high-end starter, at best a potential.
He's playing for
all-star.
Team USA right now.
Right. That's an effing home run. Like, for that matter, the Beasley, D'Lo, Vando trade was considered a single. Unless you're docking Pelinka for having to fix his own mistake, he fixed it to the tune of a Western Conference Finals trip. Like, it was a trade that propelled the Lakers from below 500 all season to 3rd round of the playoffs. Like, Malik Monk was given a single last year. He played well enough to resuscitate his career. And like, if Lonnie Walker was considered a single, Malik Monk has to be a double. THT was considered a strikeout. He was a strikeout in the sense that they chose wrongly between him and Alex Caruso. But any 46th pick who is at worst a low-end rotation player in the NBA, who can actually stay in the NBA, that's at minimum a walk. If not, I'd say it's a single.
The level setting to what is appropriate for each type of transaction you're making. The fact that the Lakers on this list are being graded on 2 undrafted free agents in and of itself means that those guys have been tremendous successes, because I am, without looking at the list, I am willing to bet that most teams didn't have all the players that they signed as undrafted free agents listed in this thing. A 2nd round pick, like you say, that makes a roster, that gets a second contract, that, look, nobody quite knows what to do with THT, and like, he would be the ultimate fantasy player on like some sort of crappy, Washington Wizards like team or something, where he can just kind of be like big stats guy on a bad team. Okay, fine. But like, the guy is going to be in the NBA for a few more seasons. Like, he's going to have a really solid NBA career. There's one other question that I want to ask about Pelinka, and you alluded to it with the idea of, like, for the Russell trade, for example, was he being dinged for undoing the mistake that he made?
That one got a strikeout, and for the record, I totally agree with Ben on that one.
That was terrible.
Yeah,
but like Ben, that's what I was getting at earlier.
Ben
like
nailed that one.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, though, it's like the impact of that. Like, not all strikeouts are created equal. That's a strikeout with like the bases loaded in Game 7 and 2 outs and whatever, and you lose. You lose the World Series. Not all strikeouts. That's the other strikeouts are third inning in June against the Pirates. In the second game of 3-game series. That's what like the Lakers have these gigantic swings and these gigantic moments of, like, if you went back a little further, like their free agent signings. Oh yeah, well, one of them is LeBron. Like, that's going to improve your grade as a franchise. They didn't have much to do with that. You trade for Anthony Davis, that is going to improve your batting average.
And ironically, that was the easiest thing for
easiest thing he ever did. No question.
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of the only trades that you and I could have completed. At the end, absolutely. But there's one. So it is such a unique thing to be the general manager of the Lakers. But there's one other question I want to get to before we're done here. So we'll do that next. Do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. So, Andy, we've talked a lot with Rob about, improvement, potential improvement and stuff like that. And, it is, this thing, again, only counts from 2019 on. Maybe that's fair. It's hard to maybe separate and parse out what's Magic versus what's Rob, what the power dynamic was there, who got final approval, whatever.
There were a lot of whispers that Rob was doing more work than Magic, but
I think I was doing more work than Magic. I think I was in that facility more than he was that year. But
we may have been in the
facility. We may have been there more than he was. I was making a joke, but I wasn't joking.
I think we really, if I look back on it, might have been in the facility.
Might have been there more. And so what I think is interesting about stuff like this, for guys who have been in this role for a long time, Mitch Kupchak was, been in Charlotte for a long time, and other dudes have been in their spots for longer than Rob Pelinka. The resume can kind of so Pelinka has some mistakes earlier in his GM tenure, whether with Magic or beyond, whether it's mishandling details about the AD trade, to length of contracts for second rounders, to the Marc Gasol kind of the fiasco of, spending capital to get him, spending capital to get rid of him, like all that stuff. And then obviously Russ. But if you are moving in a trajectory, and certainly the last year has been good, like legit good.
Very good.
How much does it matter if he has made a bunch of mistakes that were certainly consequential, and he bears responsibility, but if he learns from them and isn't that GM anymore, do those mistakes matter when you're trying to evaluate how good of a GM he is today?
I mean, if you're trying to evaluate how good of a GM is today, those mistakes matter because there hasn't been enough distance from those mistakes.
Sure.
And it's a small sample size. So it would actually be unfairly weighted towards Rob if you ignored more than half of his time as a GM.
Oh, sure. I'm not saying, but you understand what I'm getting at. Like,
well, no, but the reason I say that is because I don't think there's enough evidence without taking into account those mistakes, because they'd help you at this point evaluate who he is, because again, he's been relatively short on the job. If we're having this discussion in 2030, like when the Lakers start having their own draft picks again, and you feel like there are fewer mistakes over the next 6 to 7 years.
Right. Russell Westbrook is still a big mark against Pelinka at that point, if that's still one of the big marks against him.
Right. If that's really one of the big things you're bringing up to criticize Rob Pelinka, then at that point, it's like, look, let it go. Like, he made a mistake. He recovered from it pretty quickly. It was a damaging mistake. It was an avoidable mistake. It was one that I know you and I spent a lot of time before it was made, like waving our arms saying, please don't do this, Rob. Like, seriously, it's a bad idea. We didn't even think it was possible. We thought it was such a bad idea.
Like, this is a hard job. And so, like I said, like, it's weighted, like, not every swing matters the same. Like, you know, the Anthony Davis trade matters more than other trades that you might make, even if those trades are consequential. It's just, I'm excited to see what comes of the next couple of seasons, because the Lakers will have more of these opportunities because they are in a unique position with LeBron, who is, you know, fair to say probably, you know, in the next 2 years, got maybe 2 more years, 2 more seasons of LeBron. Maybe it goes longer than that, but of being in a position to decide how they're going to rebuild. And they'll be in a position perhaps to have a few more of their own picks, you know, as we move forward. And you have master recruiter, Alex Caruso, Austin Reeves, you know, who can bring in some of these guys he's playing with in the World Cup, and maybe we'll rank
a Freudian slip.
Yeah, maybe he can bring Alex Caruso back, but you know, maybe we'll do a show on which guys we want Reeves to prioritize when he brings them to LA. But like, this was not an off season where the Lakers had an opportunity even to do traditionally Lakers-ish stuff, and so.
Not unless you're going to go after Kyrie.
Not unless you're going to go after Kyrie. And that was so disruptive and so obviously poorly thought out. And the end result of that would have been so much less than what they currently have that it's like, no, it's not worth it. But in a season or two, they'll have the opportunity to do things that way, like where the star becomes the pursuit of stars, multiple stars, becomes the chatter, because the cap space will be there, because they'll have the assets, because whatever, you know, whatever it might be. And that's when we'll, I think, have an even better idea of, you know, what I was getting at before. Has Rob Pelinka kind of learned from the mistakes? Has he evolved in ways? Because a lot of this is really, I think, Andy, you can tell me if you agree, I think some of what we're talking about here is because the league has evolved away from some of the things that the Lakers have traditionally prioritized, namely stars above all else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it requires Rob Pelinka to be more, you know, creative, more innovative, more forward thinking. And along those lines, one of the things that you know, again, I think a lot of Laker fans would say that the jury is still out big picture for Rob Pelinka. How good is he? And I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair. But one of the things that does give me some optimism in terms of projecting ahead with Pelinka is one of my big criticisms of his time with the Lakers, frankly, a lot of his time with the Lakers, is I don't think he was a details guy. I think he was a very big picture, grandiose operator in terms of the way he did business. And
as you described it, jazz hands of GMs.
Well, it's not even just like the way he spoke. I'm talking about the way he looked to build rosters.
That's what I'm saying. I'm including that too. Like, everything is a flourish. Everything is big. Everything is splashy.
And I thought that Rob missed on a lot of the smaller details, and the smaller details matter. This period from acquiring Rui onward, and really even, I thought Rob did about as well, even heading into the season, building the roster, given the constraints that he was dealing with. Which, you mean
going into last season? You mean
going into last season? Yes, given the constraints he was dealing with, which, granted, it was his own fault he was constrained, but nonetheless, I think he did about as well as he realistically could have under those conditions. And then since then, again, Rui onward, I think he's done a better job looking at the big picture and those details. So again, that gives me optimism.
Yeah, I mean, we'll wrap here. The big choice he made last year wasn't so much the players that he chose to acquire or not acquire versus in free agency trades, the Pat Beverly deal or whatever. It was, do I pull a trigger on the Russ deal or not? Mm-hmm. And, like, you know, that was fundamentally, that was the choice. And you
for what it's worth, both thought he was smart in how long he held off and why he held off.
Yeah, I mean, and like, you know, there's an alternate universe where we could have found out what happens if you make the Indiana deal with Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, if that was truly an option, and all that. But that was really everything else is a outflowing of that, and at the very least, it turned out okay. So, anyway, the last question I will leave to people, and we'll maybe get to this next week. We're going to take Labor Day off. Everybody should. You know, don't work on Labor Day if you can avoid it. Is we talked about most popular athletes in LA, and somebody sent us a list. It has Austin Reeves ahead of Anthony Davis in popular LA athletes. I'm curious if people think that is accurate. Leave that in the comment section. Maybe we'll get into it next week. It was just something interesting that stuck out in the comment section from the YouTube page. So that was from TL Marshall 21. So thank you for that comment. We'll get into maybe in the list next week. Everybody have a great 3-day weekend. We'll talk to everybody next week.